Welcome into today's show. I'm joined by the owner and pitmaster of Swamp Boys BBQ, Mr. Rub Bagby. He comes to us out of Winter Haven, Florida, which is basically the dead center of Florida, about 45 minutes from Tampa, 45 minutes from Orlando. Rub, thanks for joining us on the show.
I appreciate you having me, Kurt. Thank you.
So for our listeners, I want to give you some context here. Rub has been competing for quite some time. He has got one of the most impressive resumes that I've seen in my short little stint in this competition world. 64 grand championships, 52 reserve grand championships, and he's a member of the FBA, the Florida Barbecue Association Hall of Fame. So Rub is no stranger to barbecue.
It's been coursing through my blood for probably 18 years now.
Well, that's a good place to start. One of the first things I always like to start when I have folks on the show is to chat about journey. I'm just very interested in journey. And so take me back. So 18 years, so 2003, 2004 timeframe. How did all this start?
Good question. It was, I'm a retired special ed teacher. At the time, I had been put in charge of a fundraiser for the school, and they wanted to do barbecue, so barbecue plates. And I had done just the typical stuff that people do on their grills and hot dogs and hamburgers, and I didn't really know proper barbecue. So I got on the internet and I started looking around, and just so happened timing was right that the time I started looking was when the Florida Barbecue Association was going to have what they call their annual meeting, and or actually annual meeting / fun cook. And the president of the FBA reached out to me and said, "Hey, do you want to come hang out with us at this contest and see what it's all about?" I'm like, "Sure, that sounds fantastic." I did. That's where I got the nickname Rub. The guys there were already into the liquor when I got there, and the one who had invited me kind of was slurring his words, and he was actually talking to Ray Lampy, Dr. Barbecue, and he said, "Ray, this is Rub. My real name is Rob." And and Ray heard Rub, and Ray goes, "Well, if your name is Rub, I want you to be on my team." And from that night on, 18 years ago, the name Rub stuck. But anyway, I hung out with those guys, that team. That was the Dixie Boys. And I say I just was watching. They won that contest. I kind of begged my way on. You know how it hooks people so quickly. I begged my way on and got to be the low man on the totem pole, washing dishes, setting up, tearing down. Didn't get to touch the meat. I mean, I could pull it out of the cooler and bring it to the table for the knife guys, but I wasn't allowed to do anything to it. So I did a lot of watching and learning and listening. And that's how I got started. I was with them for probably 6 months, and I kept seeing things that, I can cook. My mom taught me to cook, thankfully, but I'm not a technical cooking chef kind of person. I'm just a cook. And I started seeing things that I thought, well, why don't you guys try this? And the guy who owned the team said, "Well, this is my team. I make the rules in a nice way. I make the rules, and you're not going to have anything to do with that. If you want to, why don't you start your own team?" Which I later found out was his goal all along, inviting me on, was to help grow the FBA. And so I'm like, all right, you know what? I think I will. I broke off. My very first contest was January of 2004. And seeing as how I had never touched meat before, I felt like I qualified to enter the backyard, and I did. And it was at the Lakeland Pig Fest, and at the time it was probably the biggest backyard contest. I think it was 42 teams. Mm-hmm. That's what they said anyway. And dang, if I didn't end up winning grand champion at that. And that was my one and only backyard contest, and went from there. And it's been a big, big addiction since that point.
Addiction is putting it mildly. Most of our guests, I think, probably use that same word especially after they go to their first contest, or at least the first time they hear their name called. So for you, another component of barbecue that I really enjoy discussing is the mental game, the mental side of it, because it is much like anything else, much like any other competition. It does come down to the mental side of things. You did the backyard cook, you won it, but then you immediately said, you know what, I'm jumping right to the pro. What was the mentality of that when you made that decision?
I had, at that point I had probably been at 5 to 8 pro contests, sitting with the guys and setting up and tearing down their site and doing their dishes. And it just seemed like the right thing to do. Nobody, I don't recall anybody saying you got to go pro now. I don't think I still don't think there's any rules that say that. But in my mind, the backyard was a place to get your feet wet, see how you could do it, see if it was something you enjoyed, if you wanted to put some more time into. And I did, and I had fun, and I wanted to do it again. And seeing as I had won the backyard, I just didn't think it would be right to enter a backyard contest again. So I immediately stepped up and got my butt kicked for about 2 years.
Well, you won a good one. The Pig Fest in Lakeland. I've heard a lot of good things about it. We may be actually cooking that ourselves. So that's a good one to have under your belt on the backyard side to propel you to getting your butt kicked, as you said, for
Yeah.
for the next 2 years after that. So those 2 years, I'm sure, were big learning curve. Some maybe some successes, a lot of failures. What was it that after that 2 year mark, what was it that catapulted you into, over 100 GCs, RGCs, and the FBA Hall of Fame? What was that shift for you?
It probably, I can't discount the 2 years because you learn so much through your failures. Hopefully, you learn so much through your failures. Um, and so that was building a strong background for this. And then back then, there weren't a whole lot of classes being offered.
Mm.
But a person who I consider my mentor at the time was Kevin Bevington. Oh gosh, what was his? God, I forgot his team name. I'll think of it eventually. But anyway, he was winning a bunch in the FBA and was team of the year. And he offered a barbecue class. And he's here in Florida, but he actually did the class in Alabama. So I had to drive to Alabama to take his class. And I tell you what it did for me was it did a couple of things. And you mentioned the mental aspect of it. For one, it told me that I was doing a lot of things right, and to have confidence in what you're doing, knowing that you're on the right path, and knowing that you're not fundamentally wrong in what you're doing, but you're correct. The confidence factor for that is huge. I picked up several, I don't know how many, probably a dozen at least, very helpful techniques and tips and tricks. A lot of that I still use today. And a lot of them are probably now fairly common. But I believe he and others who were at his level back then are probably the people who originated those concepts. And so I got those, and then I just started tweaking. And he cooked his competition food for us. And until I'd won my first grand champion or even RGC, I kept in my mind, I just knew that there was this secret flavor that I didn't know, that the rest of us didn't know, that these guys were doing to win. And he told us it was his competition food. I believe him. And I ate it, and I'm like, there's nothing magical here. It's not, the best bottle of sauce, that's doing it. It's just a combination of tenderness, of taste, and of course making it look good. And once I figured that out, and I freed my mind of trying to figure out this magic potion, so to speak, I just put my head down figuratively and just started hammering away. And next thing I know, I look up, and one year I had qualified with 7 GCs and got an automatic invitation to the Jack. So, it was a mindset. It was realizing they're not doing a whole lot that I don't know. They're just doing it a little better. And
That's right.
them,
It's that little that takes them over the edge, that little bit that can separate a GC versus, finishing third place.
oh, exactly, exactly. I talk about in my class, and I don't know the exact number, obviously, but let's just say there's 100 details that a pit master needs to hit to reach during the time from he shows up at the contest until the last turn is done. And there's probably only going to be, and this is just my opinion, probably only going to be 3 or 4 pit masters who hit all those details perfectly.
Mhm.
A lot of us are going to forget them, forget 1 or 2 or 3. And the ones who do hit all 100, who hit them the best, with the perfect tenderness, with the perfect non-objectionable flavor, those are your guys. And the ones also who are lucky and land on nice scoring tables, those are going to be your winners. And, it just kind of trickles down. The ones who hit maybe 95 of the points and did well in the other things are going to, be your top 5. And it just kind of trickles out like that. For me, anyway, it does.
So let's camp out on the classes. So obviously classes are a big part of competition barbecue, and 20, 25, maybe even 30 years ago, I'm guessing there probably wasn't a lot of classes. We didn't have YouTube back then. So the information age, I think propelled a lot of folks, really shortened that learning curve that, back in I'm sure 20 or 30 years ago, it took a lot longer to learn that stuff. But you're at the point now where you're offering your own classes. Let's camp out on that and share some details with our listeners.
Okay, yeah. That wasn't anything that I set out to do. I didn't, in 2004, I didn't say someday I'm going to teach a class. It just kind of came through requests, actually. When I started winning, not regularly, but, winning more than losing, and being very, very consistent. Friends started asking, "Hey, are you ever going to teach us how to do this stuff? Or, what do you think? You want to do this? You want to make some money at it?" And I'm like, "Well, I really don't want to," because then once I start teaching what I do, it's going to be that much harder for me to do well and to win. But it got to the point, a lot of requests, and I decided, all right, let's do it. And um, in the beginning, I did not share my recipes. I didn't share any flavors or anything like that. I went through just techniques, um, tips, tricks, the usual stuff, and methodology. Recently, now that I'm not retired from competing, but I'm not competing nearly as much as I used to. And honestly, there's so many flavors out there, flavor profiles that you can win with. Um, I happily share what I do now. I've won a couple of firsts at the Jack, or a first and a second, and I share those recipes for pork and um, different things like that. So I basically cover everything that I do for a competition week, going back to what I look for buying the meats, establishing a relationship with a butcher if you have that opportunity, which I was fortunate to have. Injections, brines, making things, trimming, basically everything you do at a contest. We don't do it exactly on the same timeline because it is a teaching purpose or a teaching opportunity, but we cover everything, and I tell why I do what I'm doing to the best of my knowledge. Sometimes I just say because it works. I've got the results that show me that this was working. But yeah, that, and then there's a lot when it comes to boxing and putting together your turn-in package. You can definitely win or lose a contest based on what you do with that meat after you take it off the grill. Um, you can totally screw it up. You can pull something out of the ditch and, make it work.
Mhm.
So just going over things like that. And then any questions anybody has, it's wide open.
So for our listeners, again, that's swampboys.com. We'll have that link in the show notes for you guys to take a look at. And while they're searching around there, I'm sure they're also going to find that you have your own line of rubs and sauces.
I do.
How did that come about? When did that, when did the rubs and sauces come into the picture?
That's another good question. It was actually relatively early on. The rub, I came up with that for ribs, specifically for ribs, um, probably in about my third or fourth year competing. And I have literally only used that for ribs ever since. There used to be a website called National BBQ Rankings. Chad Thomas out of Georgia was running it, and he combined the FBA, the KCBS, the ICBA, all the groups, and weighted scores and whatever. And he sent me an email at one point, and he had been doing this for 6 years. And he said, "Rub, you have won more first place rib category wins than anybody else out of the country over the past 6 years." And I thought, that's not too bad. And that was with my own rib rub and my own sauce. The sauce was, I'll be honest, I didn't come up with this with ketchup and brown sugar and start from the very beginning. I took some base sauces and added some unique things to them, made them mine, and that's what I'm going with on that. Now that was for the competition, or my original sauce, my bootleg red and my bold yellow or spicy mustard sauce. Those I came up with from scratch. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Just you get a lot of requests. Oh, let me taste. Oh, that's good sauce. You ever think about selling that? And I wanted to. We in the competition world, we think our world is huge, and to us it is. But for the retail business, it's very small. So I wanted products that could sell outside of my barbecue friends. So I tried to make them appeal to the masses, and that's my main goal with my sauces and rubs, is to sell outside of the barbecue world competition realm.
I think you hit the nail right on the head. We do tend to think that the competition world is very, but in the grand scheme of things, it's a small little, piece of sand on a huge beach, basically.
Yeah.
But I love just, the journey that you described, from washing dishes, getting yelled at for touching the meat, so to speak. And then, you set out to win the backyard. You then immediately go pro. And in a relatively short amount of time, you're even creating your own sauces and rubs. And I would even say at this point, a brand itself. Right. And I think that's something that, I aspire to as well. And I think that a lot of cooks out there probably are missing the boat there in creating a brand. So I want to camp out on that, because that is important to me. And I think it's important to the longevity of any team, because let's be honest, unless you're winning a GC every weekend, competition barbecue, for the most part, is a losing proposition financially.
Yes.
So for you, was it just a matter of trial and error with the brand, or what? How did you go about building that, or did it just kind of happen?
Well, going back to 2004 and trying to come up with a team name for my very first contest, it just kind of happened. I wasn't thinking I want to get my stuff in retail stores and I want people to see it and know what it is and buy into it. I definitely wasn't thinking that. I've learned over the years that if that's your goal, to go retail, that you should always associate your name with it. So, especially for barbecue. And I kind of pulled that in a little bit with rubs, original rubs, original, whatever. They're not fantastic names, but at least I got rub out there. But yeah, I definitely wasn't thinking that long term. I wish I was. I probably would have changed it a little bit. There's lots of things that you need to be aware of. Now I'm owning Swamp Boys and I'm going with it. I'm not changing.
Mhm.
And there's things that I want to make sure that people see and that they don't see. Uh, Social media is fantastic and it's horrible all at the same time.
Yes.
Um, you can be a superstar one day and people will hang you up by your toenails the next if you do something wrong, or even if they perceive you did something wrong. So, one thing you have to do is try to be as impeccably clean and non-controversial on social media as you can. And especially now in today's atmosphere, politics, people are this side or that side, and they're not afraid to tell. And I see a lot of businesses that do that, and that's if they know what they're doing and they're aware of the consequences. But for me, that's just not something I'm going to bring into my brand. That's my own business, and it's got nothing to do with Swamp Boys. But I want Swamp Boys to be a good community neighbor. We've always tried to do stuff with veterans and active military service. We offer a 25% standing discount on everything in the store. Offer a 20% discount for classes. Um, Seeing as how I worked with children for 30 years, and a lot of our students came from the Boys and Girls Club. That's our other charity that we're closely tied with, and we try to. That's where I hold the class is behind on their property behind their building, and try to show them some love every year. So you need to be clean on social media. You need to be a good community citizen. You need to um, believe in charity. You got to be kind. You got to be open. You've got to be. You just got to be a good person, in my
That's right.
opinion.
You're absolutely right. I see a lot of businesses, not just barbecue, businesses across the board who really make some very head scratching posts on social media that seem like they do more harm than good.
Yeah.
And you're right. That can absolutely, especially nowadays with all the quote keyboard warriors that are out there.
Hmm.
You're right. You can become a villain very quickly if you're not careful. And as you mentioned, as you said, social media it can be a blessing and a curse all at the same time.
For
That's
sure.
exactly what it is. Now tell me this: where do you see, as you look out, right? So I know in 2004 you really didn't know what you didn't know. You were washing dishes and just trying to learn more, and you weren't thinking about creating a brand. And now that you have, what what's your vision? What does the future hold for Swamp Boys?
That's a good question. I'm retired from teaching, and my main focus now is to try to grow the brand, grow the distribution of the sauce and the rubs and stuff like that. And I've learned, and I'm learning the hard way that that's a whole nother world out there. Um, Distribution has its own language, and it's not as obvious as I thought it would be. I went to college. I got a degree, and I'm not the smartest guy, but I'm not dumb. But some of that stuff just doesn't make sense to me.
Right.
So I'm trying to learn that. Got to play the game. I'm learning that. People say, "Oh well, whatever. Walmart. Why don't you put it in Walmart?" Well, you can't just put it in Walmart. There's so many hoops. I was in Publix, and that was probably a 13, 14-month process
Mhm.
just to get there. And they came and asked me. So it's a challenge. It's hard, but I want to continue to put out products that if it's something that both the competition community can use and works in everybody's home kitchen, that's kind of what I'm hoping for. maybe a couple of more rubs, maybe another sauce or two, and then just continue to grow it and just enjoy it and see what happens. I don't have a in my retirement. I've kind of softened up a little bit. I'm not hardcore 2-year plan, 5-year plan. I did that for a long time, and now let's go fishing plan. Let's go cook a couple of contests plan. Let's go travel some. But yeah, I definitely want to grow it. I wanted to spread the distribution, and I would love to get it to where it can just kind of take care of itself and give me some extra income on the side.
That's really cool to hear that Publix came to you.
That was actually at the Lakeland Pig Fest. That's their hometown where they're based out of.
Hmm.
And we were selling sauce, and they came up, and I was in the middle of turn-ins, and two or three guys in button-down shirts came to a barbecue time. That made me suspicious right off the bat. And I could hear my buddy who was helping me serving food was talking to him, and they were asking weird questions. I was kind of eavesdropping, and he came up to me and goes, "Hey, do you want to talk to these guys? They're talking about maybe getting your stuff on the shelf." And I'm like, "Yeah, right, whatever." And Publix was never mentioned. And I went down there, and they're asking these questions that just didn't make sense to me, and I was almost dismissing them. I was polite, but I was saying, "Yeah, yeah, I could probably whatever, yeah." And finally, I said, "Well, would you like to be on the shelves at Publix? Let me get you a sandwich.
Let me
Here,
get
try
you a
this sauce."
Here's a card.
Yeah. And it just went from there. So yeah, that was cool.
So as far as, the equipment that you're using, the cookers, have those, well, I'm guessing, so two-part question. One, what do you use now? And is it the same that you started with in 2004?
Yeah, it's not the same. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and lay claim to one, two, three, four. I'm one of four people who cooked on, to the best of my knowledge, the very first gravity cooker.
Mm.
And it was called a Lanny Q, or that's what the guy named it. His name was Lanny, and his idea was not to build a competition cooker, but it was to build something that could be used in third world countries to help heat water and build a quick, efficient fire that would take care of itself, feed itself. And he brought it over into the contest world, and we call it Frankenstein because it would go back to the shop and they'd rivet more things to it and stuff like that. So and that was actually with Stump was the one who was doing that for us, Stump Smokers. And he was the first pit that I bought. His was the first pit that I bought, and it was probably also the last pit that I bought because I started doing really well with it. And then pit manufacturers started coming to me and saying, "Hey, what do you think about this? Would you like to cook on this?" And so over the years, I've cooked on lots and lots of different pits, Langs, Stumps, Deep South, Yoder Smokers, Old Hickories, Gateway Drum Smokers, Sweet Smoke Q Smokers, and Traegers. And right now I'm cooking on Old Hickory, Sweet Smoke Q drums, and a Traeger. And it's a fantastic setup. And going to my class, it's not about how to cook on a drum or how to cook on a Traeger. It's how to cook barbecue, and just look at your smoker as an oven, and we just make tweaks to it. I mean, they provide heat and smoke, and once you understand how to run them, the process is pretty close, pretty repetitive no matter what you're cooking on. You're trying to get smoke, you're trying to get color, you're trying to get tenderness.
That's exactly right. I think there's so much attention paid to cookers, and there's obviously some very loyal people out there to all the different brands. And I was quick to learn the hard way that It's not the cooker, it's the cook.
Yeah, yeah.
That makes the biggest difference. So, I love how you said that. And the fact that, you're able to cook. I think, I have a lot of respect for cooks that can make great barbecue no matter what they're cooking on. I mean, I think that is one of the true, the true measuring sticks of a great, pit master. No matter what you throw at them or her, they're going to create, great barbecue.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it's barbecue is not rocket science. I mean, it's like I said, you put some smoke on it, you put some color to it, and you get it tender. And whatever pit you're cooking on, do that, and tweak it from there.
So let's talk about the competition world right now. So the competition world, obviously, like a lot of things, post COVID, I've seen or I've noticed that contests are down. Teams, there's not as many teams there showing up. Curious your take because you've been in this much longer than we have. But one thing that concerns me is the longevity. The really just the long-term future of the competition world, specifically, with festivals, with the general public, because I feel like sometimes we get a little bit, we as in the teams tend to get very, what's the word, introverted, maybe the wrong word, but I guess what I'm getting at is sometimes we're not as open to patrons or the public as maybe we should be. um, and it really dawned on me in a couple of contests when people kept coming to us asking us for barbecue,
Hmm.
and I finally just said, well, we're just going to sell some barbecue and see what happens. And the
Hmm.
first two times we did it, we sold out. So,
Yeah, yeah.
but I'm curious your take. What do you feel like is the path forward to ensure this competition community continues to stay relevant in the eyes of organizers and festival promoters?
Well, you hit on some really good things. Your thought about being introverted. I was probably the biggest person, or I did that probably more than anybody. I would get to a contest and set up, and my trailer has awnings on the outside that have, they come up with pneumatic things, and the whole back end is wide open, and the smokers are on the porch and stuff like that. Once I started doing well and had my routine, I would get to a contest, I would shut everything down, and I literally wouldn't come out until turn-ins. I would stay in there and just stay so hyper focused, and maybe not so much hyper focused, but not distracted, because there's lots and lots of shenanigans that goes on at a contest. And I found out that if I stayed inside, if I avoided all the distractions, I did much better. And people were walking around, they'd see my trailer and, oh, I wonder where he is. And I enjoy talking about barbecue, but I think there needs to be less people like I was, who are just so focused on the barbecue they forget about the people, or purposely ignore the people. And I think you definitely need to involve the public a lot more. There's Big Papa Smokers out in California holds or he used to hold a King of the Smoker. It was an invitational that I was fortunate to go through 3 times, and he wouldn't open it up into the public until after turn-ins. And then after turn-ins, I don't want to say required, but he highly suggested that the teams interact as much as possible with the public. And we would do demonstrations every half hour. Like I did a steak demonstration one year. I did a turkey demonstration one year. And the groups of people would go around. They could learn from this person, that person. They could learn whole hog ribs, chicken. They could learn everything. Just a quick 1.5 hour class, and they loved it. I thought it was a great model. Yeah, I don't know about it was nice not having people there while you're doing turn-ins, but I do think that people like to see that. They like to see you, hurrying and scrambling, getting your box ready, and at the jack when cook team coming through, get out of the way, because there's so many people. And, it can be an exciting atmosphere. So I think the teams need to interact more. They need to not be like I was. And yeah, I think if it's going to continue and not just continue, but thrive, definitely need to involve the public more somehow.
Absolutely. Yep.
Free
Absolutely.
samples, whatever. You know, have a viewing area. Don't allow your sides to be down during cook time, and maybe have a small fence or a ribbon where you don't want people to come across, but invite them to watch. Hey, this is what I'm doing now. Look at this. I'm checking tenderness. Stuff like that. Get people on top.
Make it more personable. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. So as we wind down things and wrap up the show, what are some parting words of wisdom that you would have for listeners that are, considering getting into competition barbecue, or maybe just want to up their barbecue game? What kind of words of advice would you have for those folks?
Don't overthink it. Don't or understand that there are so many different ways to create great barbecue. You don't have to do this guy's or that guy's or this guy's. You can do a little bit of this guy's, some of that guy's, and come out with good barbecue, real good barbecue. But another thing you don't want to do though is constantly switch. You don't want to try this one, and if it doesn't work, say, forget it, I'm going over here, trying this one. And if that doesn't, forget it, I'm going over here. Pick something from a reputable person and use his or her examples and try to perfect them. Because most of the time it's just you're missing steps or you're missing points. There's lots and lots of details to do competition barbecue and to do well. And just a lot of practice. I mean, I can't tell you how many crappy ribs and chicken and brisket and pork that I've cooked and thrown away or fed to the dog or whatever. It doesn't come just like that. I know society is used to that nowadays with instant gratification, but to get really good at it, you're just going to have to pay some dues. You're going to have to burn your arms. You're going to have to get a fire in your smoker that you didn't mean to do, and you're going to have to learn. You're going to have to make mistakes and learn from the mistakes and just tweak your process and take notes. Take notes. I should have mentioned that earlier. Take notes. What you did, what the weather was like, what you thought about it, finish temps, cook temps, things like that. I have so many notes. I can go back to not 2004, but back, before 2010 and see what I was doing. And if you're competing, put how you placed after that note. I can go back and say, oh, look at this, brisket at first here, here, and here, and it has all these things in common. Why don't I just kind of pull those common factors out and see what happens?
That's a powerful way to wind down the show. Take notes and put in the work. You got to put in the practice. If you don't do it, you can't get upset if you're not, if you're not bettering yourself and getting your name called more often. So again, for our listeners, we're chatting with pitmaster and owner of Swamp Boys BBQ out of Florida. Rub, we appreciate the time, sir. Enjoyed the conversation, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Kurt, man. I appreciate the invitation. I've enjoyed it and look forward to meeting you sometime in person.